Welcome to today's DNA. We will be discussing 5 topics. First 4 topics are related to the prelims and 5th topic is related to the mains. So, first topic is on the contempt of the court. Second topic on the Nauradehi wildlife sanctuary. Third topic is on the Starlink internet connection. Fourth topic is on the provisional report on the accident. Fifth topic, which is mains oriented, is related to the Pakistan's double game theory, and it is written by the Shashi Tharoor. We will try to discuss it in detail. First news is on the contempt of the court. So, you might be knowing the background of the issue. So, what happened? So, in one of the court hearing, B.R. Gavai gave some comment which was not well received. So, he was basically commenting upon the restoration of head of Lord Vishnu, and something was said which was not appreciable at all, right? It was basically received mixed response from the Indian civil society, right? Few called it his own discussion, few criticize it, right? Accordingly, few YouTubers and other dignitaries have made comments which was basically considered a derogatory remark on the Supreme Court of India as well as the CJA, the Supreme Court as an institution, right? In fact, B.R. Gavai has also made some comments that that he respects all the religion, right, and he'll have to give the statement. But this instance basically exposes how vulnerable we are and how vulnerable Supreme Court is, and how authority of Supreme Court is basically diminishing over a period of the time. That's why we are discussing this topic, right? So, what is the background of the contempt of the court? So, we'll have to understand contempt of the court is not directly written in the Indian constitution. There is no explicit mention of the contempt of the court, but it is a derived function, right? From where we are deriving it. So, it is Article 19 subclause 2, which basically deals with the reasonable restrictions, right, on fundamental freedoms, right? That is important, and accordingly, it is the basically Supreme Court who made contempt of the court guidelines, right? Or accordingly, a Contempt of Court Act was enacted in 1971, right? So, what is the historical origin of this contempt of the court? So, basically, contempt of court background of it lies with the British common laws, right, in which they ensured that the court enjoys overwhelming power, right, and their orders and are obeyed and their authority is not diminished. Accordingly, during British era in 1926, right, Contempt of the Court Act was enacted by the Britishers, which later on being changed to the Contempt of the Court 1971 of the independent India, right. So, what is the underlying purpose of enacting such kind of the act? A is the protection of judicial authority and indignity, right. You will have to understand that judiciary, which is one of the center plank of the Indian governance organ of the government, right. If you are not protecting the authority of the judiciary, as well as if you are not able to protect the dignity of the judiciary, it will basically result bad into the overall functioning of the government of the day. Second is it will also ensure that there is a proper administration and justice is not basically constrained by any kind of the criticism which is not solicited, right. Also, we will have to balance the freedom of speech, which is very important aspect of the Indian judiciary, but we will have to also ensure that somehow the judicial integrity is also maintained. That is why this Contempt of the Court Act has been enacted in India. So, there are basically two bases of the contempt of the court. One is the constitutional basis and the statutory basis. So, now we have already said that it is written in Article 19, right, that there shall be some reasonable restriction. Accordingly, contempt of court lies in that. However, under Article 129 and under Article 215, right, Supreme Court and High Courts are considered code of record. Now, what is the meaning of the code of record? Means that proceedings are taken as evidence. Accordingly, Article 129, right, empowers Supreme Court to punish for contempt of Supreme Court, and a similar power is given to the High Court under Article 215, that in case of the contempt, if honorable High Courts feel that there is a contempt of their proceeding or otherwise, this contempt of court can be initiated. Not only that, it is Article 142 which says the complete justice, right, empowers Supreme Court to pass orders necessary for the functioning of the complete justice, right. So, these are the various articles under which contempt of court can be basically initiated. Accordingly, we have already made a contempt of the court in 1971, right? So it was based on one of the committee, right, in which basically two type of the contempt has been delineated. One is the civil contempt and second is the criminal contempt, right? So based on the basically threshold, these there is a classification of the contempt in India. So basically section 2B of this act basically defines the civil contempt as a willful disobedience. For example, if court is passing some order and the person is not obeying it, right, it is not obeying it, then the contempt can be initiated. If it is not obeyed by, then it can be initiated. At the same time, criminal contempt is defined in section 2C of the contempt of the court, right, which says if someone is scandalizing or try to scandalize the proceeding of the court, right, or there can be prejudice against the basically court, or someone interferes into the functioning of the court, then contempt of court can be initiated against that person, right. Also, this is given for the High Court and Supreme Court. What about the lower courts? For example, district court, right? Try to recall of one of the famous movie, that is the Jolly LLB, in which you might have seen that honorable Judge Tripathi is saying contempt laga dunga, right? So accordingly, section 10 of the same Contempt of the Court Act 1971 empowers High Court to punish contempt for subordinate court. Like for example, district court, there are other courts as well. So if they are doing some willful disobedience or you are scandalizing, contempt of court can be enacted by Supreme Court, not the district court itself, right. Also, section 40 deals with the procedure for the contempt, and section 12 of it deals with the punishment. What should be the punishment? For example, up to 6 months of the simple imprisonment or fine of 2000. At the same time, for the criminal, there can be different kind of the basically triggers, right. Also, there can be in facie contempt, in which if basically court proceeding is going on and you are basically someone is basically interfering into it or obstructing the proceeding of the court, on the spot contempt can be initiated, that we call in facie contempt. So, they are basically different type of the contempt, criminal, civil and in facie, right. Hope it is clear to type of the contempt. Now, what are the key judicial pronouncement related to the contempt of the court? So, first is the Ashwini Kumar Ghosh versus Arvind Bose, in which court held that the basically advocates are basically immune, because if they will fear all the time from the contempt of court, so there will be, they won't be able to basically do the proper kind of the basically justice to their clients, right, and hence justice will be basically somehow hampered. So, this case provides that lawyers can freely discuss anything in the court subject to certain limitations. Second is the Anil Ratan Sarkar versus Hirak Ghosh, in which is said that contempt of court power must be exercised cautiously. It is not like that the court should use it on the whims and fancies. There should be some proper mechanism. Second is the MB J. Narayanan versus Court of the Kurla. It basically upheld that contempt finding against the individual or abusive language in public speech criticizing the High Court order established that criminal contempt includes acts of undermining judicial authority as well. And finally is the Sangam versus Court of the Madras, which reiterated the purpose of the contempt of court, ensuring administration of justice, condemned creation of use of fake court orders and several contempt acts, right. So, these are the various judicial pronouncement which are related to the contempt of the court. Now, based on these information, let us try to solve the question which is shown in the screen. Second news is Nauradehi Wildlife Sanctuary. So, what happened? You might be knowing. So, cheetah was reintroduced in India, right? So, accordingly, we have started a project that we call Cheetah Reintroduction Project in 2022, right? The famous one. And accordingly, the first site to reintroduce the cheetah was selected as the Kunnao National Park. Now, there is a proposal to introduce one more wildlife sanctuary, that is we will call Nauradehi Wildlife Sanctuary, as a third adopt to the whom? Our cheetahs, right. So, a background of it, right. So, basically this project is related to the project Cheetah, which was started in 2022, right, already, right, and we are basically importing cheetahs from Namibia and the South Africa, you might be knowing it, right. Now, first was the Kunnao National Park 2022, second was the Gandhi Sagar Wildlife Sanctuary 2024, and third in 2025 we are basically proposing new wildlife sanctuary, that is the Nauradehi Wildlife Sanctuary, which will be cleared as a third site for the reintroduction of cheetahs in India, right? Now, we will have to understand how cheetahs are different from the big cats. Very important for UPSC. In one of the UPSC previous question, they have asked a question ki how cheetahs are different. Let us try to ponder upon it. So basically, cheetahs are world's fastest animal. They can attain maximum speed of 120 km per hour, right? It's very basically high speed, basically designed to make it sure that they are preying in a better manner, right? And it is enabled by unique physical adaptation like semi-retraceable claws, right? The claws of other big cats are not retraceable, but their claws are retraceable. They have quite flexible spine as well as they are quite aerodynamically unique. And unlike big cats, they are built for the speed and not for the strength, right? They are only built for the speed one, right? And have solid spots and distinctive tear mark. You can see there is a distinctive tear mark which is not available in the leopard or the, for that matter, jaguars, right? That's why we can identify it, right? Also, they cannot roar. This was the precise question which came into the UPSC. And they possesses non-retraceable claws for traction during sprint, unlike the fully retraceable claw of big cats. Now coming to the Nauradehi Wildlife Sanctuary. So basically it is largest wildlife sanctuary of Madhya Pradesh and it nearly covers 1197 square kilometers of the space, right? And it spans across Sagar, Damoh, Narsinghpur district of the MP, right? And they have the overlapping basically place with the Ganga as well as the Narmada, which is very important, right? Now, what are the ecological and conservation challenges pertaining to cheetahs? So basically, cheetah require open landscape because they are quite basically one of the fastest animal, right? Obviously, they will need the speed, right, and the prey base and robust prey population. And India's sanctuary must balance species specific needs, right? Because one basically एक चीज के लिए सारी चीजें नहीं हो सकती, और चीता का प्रे बेस का इज डिफरेंट, राइट? लायन का इज डिफरेंट. There can be different for the jaguars, so we cannot adopt a similar approach to the different species of the animal, right? Presence of tigers in Nauradehi basically introduces predator competition. So there will be tigers, there will be cheetahs, there will be predation. Or for if there is a predation, there is a competition among the predators, and if there is a competition, there will be conflict. If there is a conflict, then there are likely chances that one of the species will definitely will be harmed, right? This is a basically theory of jungle, right? And the project aims to promote genetic diversity, ecological balance and long-term site sustainability across the India. That is all. Now, what is the impact of the project and what is the significance of it? So, project's multi-dimensional approach blends animal translocation, community development, corridor formation and biodiversity conservation, and it may serve as stepping stone, the first stone, right, for future cheetah population expansion and ecosystem restoration across the India, right? Replicating lessons learned from the Project Tiger. Now, tell me in the comment box when Project Tiger was introduced in India, and you will have to correlate it with the one of the famous basically environmental conservation summit that occurred during that time, right? And the initiative aligned with the India's commitment under the various biodiversity conventions and sustainable development goals, right? That is all. Now, let us try to understand. We have discussed the biodiversity park and the national park. Let us try to understand what is the difference between a national park and a biodiversity park. So basically, national parks are basically protected entire ecosystem, and they are basically enacted by the union government in general, right? And at the same time, wildlife sanctuary are generally basically established by the state government, right? That is the key difference in terms of the legal derivation. Now, what are the legal protection? So, national parks are basically established by the state or central government, and boundaries are fixed, rigid. You might be knowing the concept of the core, buffer and other areas, right? So, this is applicable for the basically national park, which is not applicable in verbatim for the basically biodiversity park, right? Entry and access are very restricted in the core areas, which is not case with the wildlife sanctuary. There is a lesser restriction in wildlife sanctuaries. Size is usually larger. Wildlife sanctuary is usually smaller. You will see that multiple wildlife sanctuary can make a national park, right? Now, they work for the ecosystem conservation. They generally work for the species protection. So, that is also a difference. And they include recreation, education and sustainable tourism, primarily focused on species survival and the protection. That is the wildlife sanctuaries. Examples of wildlife sanctuaries and national parks are Jim Corbett, the famous one nearby Delhi, is a national park. Kaziranga, famous for one horned rhinos, and Kanha National Park, again very famous for the tigers and all, are basically example of national park. Wildlife sanctuaries are Bharatpur and Periyar. Now, based on all this information, let us try to solve the question which is shown in the screen. Next news, very interesting, that is the Starlink internet in India. So, what happened? Maharashtra in last year, around November 25, they basically did a basically letter of intent, LOI, that we call, with the Starlink. That is the project of Elon Musk, famous one, right? World's one of the most influential, basically billionaire, right? So, basically they wanted to introduce the satellite connection in India using this Starlink project, right? What happened? So, Maharashtra on Wednesday became the first Indian state to formally collaborate with the billionaire Elon Musk on Starlink to deliver satellite based internet connectivity across remote and undeserved region. That is the news. Now, let us try to understand more about the news. As rightly said, in November 2025, they have made a letter of intent. Accordingly, this was finalized Wednesday. What is the Starlink? So, let us try to understand the Starlink. So, basically Starlink is a satellite internet constellation operated by SpaceX, which is Elon Musk aerospace company. Now, if you have to basically visualize this, then a picture is given in the basically screen. So, basically it is, you can see the entire earth is dotted by small kind of the satellites. So, Starlinks work in that way only. So, there are other satellites as we even in government of India, we have the satellite for the communication, but they are very limited in number, right? If they are limited in number, then there is a limitation attached with. What Starlink has uniquely done, they have basically dotted the entire earth with their small satellites, right? And each satellite is connected with themselves, they communicate with themselves using laser technology, which makes them quite effective. Speed can be better, and they can be better penetrating the remote areas. That is the precise use in India as well, right? So, that is all. Similar, think of the vast network of small satellite orbiting earth working together relay team. जैसे relay में होता है ना कि one person basically will give the baton to other, another person will give the baton to other. Similar process is used in the Starlink process, right? So, very simplification of the basically key, very critical issue, but again it is what is it, right? And basically what happens in traditional satellite, we will have to rely upon the data centers and all. What Starlink is unique, Starlink what does, so basically they are not depending on the ground networks, they connect themselves basically in the low earth orbit, let's say low earth orbit only, right? That is why they make it quite significant as well, because they do not need the physical infrastructure. If there is a physical infrastructure, there will be physical barriers, it will be hampered by the dark, basically dense canopy, or it can be hampered by the weather conditions, which is not in the case with the Starlink, because they uses the space based communication that makes them quite unique, that we call from highway to sky ways kind of the communication. So, what happens? So, traditional broadband is likely building highways, right, using fiber optic cables to connect cities, which is expensive, time consuming and limited by the geography. However, Starlink, what they do, establish an aerial network of bridges in the sky, right? Try to recall, just try to understand, hot balloons basically dotted the entire earth, right? So, they can communicate with themselves. Similar condition is with the basically Starlink. The skyway approach bypasses all physical barrier, mountains, forest, river, anything, right? They bypasses, and accordingly they establish communication. So, there is a three-way process how they establish communication. First is the low earth orbit satellite, second is the ground station, and third is the user terminals. What is this? Let us try to understand. So, what happens? Basically Starlink is having basically more than 5,000 operational satellites as of now, which operate in low earth orbit, means nearly 300 to 500 kilometers above the surface of the earth, right? And they are basically planning to introduce more than 42,000 satellite in the low earth orbit in coming days. And they are very small, basically they are having a very small weight as well, like 500 pounds only, right? And they basically orbit around the earth in 90 to 120 minutes, means either in 1.5 घंटा और 2 घंटे में ये पूरा अर्थ का ऑर्बिट कर लेता है. Second is the ground station, that is the gateway. So, these are the ground station basically which connect satellite network to the terrestrial internet, right? They will communicate with them and they will communicate with the basically ground station. And at the user terminal, user need a Starlink kit, right? Try to recall during the old days, we need to have the antenna, similar antenna will be used, right? Accordingly, these antenna can be used, and that will be Wi-Fi router and all, and you can access the internet. And this is the process I have tried to simplify it. Now, what are the key benefits? Why India is basically pursuing for the Starlink connection? So, A is the digital divide. So, you might be knowing that at least 91% of Indian urban are having the internet connectivity, right? But only 83% of the rural background do have this internet connectivity. Not only that, optical fiber, which is considered a faster way of the basically communication, only 3.8% rural household have the optical fiber connectivity, which is at least 5 times lesser than the urban areas. For example, for urbans, it is like 15% Indians who do have the optical connectivity. You might be listening to this basically video over the optical fiber network only, right? And basically 35 of Indians as per the data available on the government websites lack the stable internet data, right? They have the internet data, but it's not stable. Again, it will hamper the prospects in the future, right? Now, what are the core benefits? So, think like this internet connectivity is like oxygen. Think, just imagine that you are having very smartphone with you, but it is not connected with the internet. If it is not connected with the internet, it will not work. So, it is like having the oxygen, and the Starlink will provide the critical oxygen to the rural household. To simplify it, you can use it, right? It can bring in various level of the transformation. For an example, educational sector, right? So, rural household can even listen to the high speed videos like the YouTube video that we are discussing on the various aspect, which is not possible in the remote area like remote hinterland of the Arunachal Pradesh, Sikkim, or for that matter Himachal Pradesh, Uttarakhand. If the Starlink is working, it will be quite possible. Second is the healthcare provision. For example, consider a case of the Uttarakhand. There is a very remote area. And you might have heard about this as well, ki, for the delivery purpose and all, we have to communicate from the basically valleys or from the hills toward the cities, and it the critical time is lapse, right? So, it can be removed if we are having very smart and stable connection at the rural household, right? So, high quality healthcare provider can be accessed using all these things. Third is the economic empowerment. So, again, it works as a force multiplier. The stable connection works as a force multiplier, and it will empower the unconnected people of the India. Also, it will ensure the governance and service delivery. Try to recall the common service centers, which is available in few cities. With this common service center will be basically available to each and every cities and hinterland part of the India as well. So, hence, government delivery can be smoothened. There will be lesser corruption. It will be effective. It can help us in the disaster management as well. Just take the example of the Uttarakhand disaster, which occurred recently, right? Dharali, there was a landslide and otherwise, right? So, the first thing which was disconnected was the internet connection. But if we have a stable connection, high speed data connection, so we can access the damage, the people who are trapped can access us, right? And there will be better management of the disaster in that condition. And also, it is needed for the strategic connectivity, right? During the war or the conflict, we can use it, these kind of a connection. That's why it's very important to have a very stable connection. Now, what are the issues and challenges associated with such kind of the connectivity? First is the regulatory and national security concerns. So, what happened? You might have heard about that this our data is being basically exported to the other countries, which creates a kind of somehow security issues. For example, our data, if it is breached or basically being used by the foreign hostile country, they can manipulate us as well. Accordingly, what government has made, that government has made certain provision to protect our data. There is a data protection law. Accordingly, they have said that no data can be copied or decrypted if it is Indian data. Second, there can be no mirroring of Indian user tariff or system outside the country. The server have to be based out of India only, and there need to be mandatory law for interception capability for the security. In case security agencies are willing, they can basically intercept. Intercept मतलब आपकी चीजों को पढ़ सकते हैं security agencies in exceptional conditions, obviously, right? Also, in case of the conflict, we have seen in 1999 conflict when GPS basically access was denied with the USA. In such situation, if we are depending upon any foreign national country, they can do it as well, right? So, to take all these things, we will have to very cautious in India, right? Also, there was a recently spectrum allocation and pricing dispute. Basically, the TRAI, this is the Telecom Regulatory Authority of India, is the top agency which regulates the telecom sector, it made it mandatory to basically give 3500 per meter hertz, right, to a basically service provider. Also 500 extra will have to give if the basically service provider are in the urban areas, which will basically make our data lesser competitive, because in India we are known for our cheaper data, right. 1 GB and 1.5 GB is easily available, right. So if they are imposing such kind of the basically charges, then it will cost us heavily, right. Second is the licensing and compliance mechanism. So basically Starlink receives an unified license from the Department of Communication, that is the DOT, in August 2025, and from the Indian National Space Promotion and Authorization Center, that is we call InSpace, in July 2025. However, commercial operations cannot begin until final spectrum pricing is determined, trial spectrum demonstrate are completed, right, and security clearance for each gateway and half are obtained. Not only that, there need to be 20% indigenized ground infrastructure. They cannot import each and every infrastructure from the Starlink only. We will have to manufacture 20% component in India. These are basically conditions which will be very hard for the Starlink to, as of now, to implement. And there are the technical and operational challenges. For example, there are limited coverage per satellite, frequent handovers are there, which can basically jeopardize. Also, these small satellites have limited lifespan, right. Usually the lifespan of the bigger satellite is of 10 to 15 years, but these small 500-pound satellites have the lifespan of 5 to 8 years, which will in result cost very heavy to the service provider, that is the Starlink. Also, they are not immune to the atmospheric effects. Wear and tear can occur because of the low Earth orbit satellites, right. So basically, beside that, there is the economic and affordability concerns. For example, the estimated setup cost of 30,000 to 35,000 and monthly subscription of 3,000 to 3,500 may result into, again, there can be more costly than whatever we are getting, right. And there is a competition from the market dynamics. There is environmental hazard concerns as well. That's why there can be limitation. Now, what can be the future outcome of it? So there can be short term outcome, there can be medium term outcome, and there is long term outcome. In short, basically we need to do the pilot implementation of the project. We will have to basically develop the infrastructure, because data centers need to be at least 10 data gateways to be in India, right, including the Noidas and the Lucknow and other critical places of India. And commercial launch also depends on the various factors. For example, they are supposed to launch it in Q1 of 2026. We will have to wait and watch. Now, in medium term, basically it will accelerate Digital India campaign, which is one of the successful campaign of the recent government, and it can work as an economic multiplier, right. It can multiply our economic prospects. Also, there can be impact on the agriculture, education sector, healthcare sector, and financial inclusion is also one of the key aspect in the medium term. And in the long term, they will be able to basically divide, narrow this divide of the urban rural basically economic rebalance, because again rural areas which is basically living in the silos because of the lesser connectivity, lesser data speed, it will be integrated with the mainland India. Then we can develop the smart village, and basically it will also improve the national security architect of India. These are the benefits of it. Now, what are the potential challenges? One is the timely resolution of spectrum price. We have discussed how it is disputed. Then effective implementation of data localization, government subsidies, and development of domestic satellite communication is also needed. We need the Starlink, but we also need some domestic alternate, for example BSNL, right. And balancing competition between satellite and territorial broadband provider is also one of the key basically things to watch. Now, based on all this information, let us try to solve the question which is shown in the screen. Next news is on the provisional report on the road accident. So basically MORTH, that is the Ministry of Road Transport and Highway, basically released its internal provisional report of the 2024 related to the road accident in India. And this data is very very unique to understand, because there are paradoxes in it. For example, the number of accident has marginally declined, but the death due to such accident has increased, which is very unique, right. Also, according to report, India recorded nearly 1 death for every 2 road accident in 2024. So 2 accident and 1 death, so 50-50 situation. It's very critical, and it is related to the GS paper 2, GS paper 3, and even you can use it in GS paper 3, right. Now, let us try to understand the key finding of the report. So what it says, total accident in India basically was slightly below vis-a-vis last year, but total fatality increased, slightly increased, and overall fatality rate has worsened because fewer crashes but higher death per crash is there in India. This is very unique. Now let us try to understand the state, top 5 state with the casualties rate, right, death rates or the accident rate. In 2025, Tamil Nadu topped the list. However, the trend says there is a decline in the basically fatalities or the accidents. Second is the Madhya Pradesh, which was stable. In Kerala, it increased. In Uttar Pradesh, there was a decline, and in the Karnataka, there was a slight decline. Tamil Nadu remains India's most accident-prone state in the 7th consecutive year, more developed, and there is a more deaths as well as accident as well. Now, Uttar Pradesh topped the rank with the fatalities, means death count UP में ज़्यादा हो रहा है. Tamil Nadu high despite of the lower accident have lowered but death is higher. Uttar Pradesh records the deadliest accident to fatality ratio, and more than half of the crashes result into that, 50-50 result is there. However, in the cases like Punjab, Haryana, Gujarat, Himachal Pradesh, there is a decline in the death rates as well as a decline in the accident, right. At the same time, Kerala and Delhi is seeing more accident as well as more death, right. Now, what are the key institutions related to the such kind of the data compilation and accident management? So, first is the Ministry of Road Transport and Highways, and it is a nodal ministry for road safety policy, data collection and the enforcement coordination in India. And it also implemented Motor Vehicle Amendment Act 2019. This is very basically umbrella legislation. Second is the National Road Safety Organization, that is called NRSC, which is an apex advisory body on the road safety measures and coordination among the stakeholders. Next is the National Highway Authority of India, which look for the infrastructure and implementation of zero fatality corridor. Next, the Supreme Court Committee on the Road Safety, which were basically started in 2014, which monitors states' compliance with the road safety directives. Next is the basically World Bank and the WHO. They basically support India's integrated road accident database, and the United Nations records of the action for the road safety was also being implemented by these agencies. So, what as per this report, what are the challenges? So, challenge area 1 is the high fatality rate despite fewer crashes. Second is the enforcement gap is there. For example, weak enforcement of helmet and seat belt laws, over speeding and drunk driving remains widespread. Next is the infrastructure deficiency, which is resulted in the poor design of the highways, lack of pedestrian infrastructure and inadequate signage. Next is the data gap, means people are not reporting adequately. If they are reporting, it is not being shown in the data. Behavioral issues also there, you might be knowing if you are living in Delhi, how people behave in such scenarios, and there is a limited state level accountability in case of the road fatality. Now, what is the way forward? First is the adopt a safe system approach. Second is the strengthen road design and engineering. For example, there could be more zero death corridor, or for example, there can be more identification of black spots. Black spots are the areas which is more prone to the accident, right. Then we can improve the national emergency response. For example, National Highway Accident Relief Service scheme and integration of it 108 can be improved. Then we can leverage the technology. For example, AI driven technology can be used to basically detect, monitor and use other AI for the prevention of the accident and the deaths. Then we need to aware the public and we need to educate the public. There can be more campaign from the government, and there can be institutional reforms as well. For example, District Road Safety Committee can be enacted, and we will have to adopt the Sweden's Vision Zero model, in which there is no loss of accident, loss of life after accident. So, these are the best practices which can use. So, in conclusion, so 2024 data underscores a disturbing trend that India's roads are becoming less forgiving even as accident number dips. Second is the signal that severity of the crashes is rising due to the poor enforcement, and road safety must envelop from the policy afterthought and core governance priority, and we will have to work upon the basically sustainable development goal, and we will to align ourselves to this in order to make our road more safer. So, based on all this information, let us try to solve the question which is shown in the screen. Next news is on the mains for the mains related thing because Dr. Shashi Tharoor, who is one of the known expert of the international relation, has written one editorial today on our favorite nation, that is the Pakistan. Let us try to understand. So basically, the editorial by Shashi Tharoor titled "Pakistan's Double Game with China and America" is basically a sophisticated critique of Pakistan's foreign policy, and it's a very well articulated article. We will try to discuss the core theme of the issues and the mental model that he used. Now, the main idea, the core idea that was basically pitched by Shashi Tharoor is, so basically he's trying to he said that Pakistan is trying to monkey balance between two superpower, one is the China and the USA. At the same time, basically they are trying to gain out of the China as well as the Pakistan in both terms, that is the economic gain as well as the strategic gain, which is a very unique, right? And Shashi Tharoor argues that this double game is not sustainable for long term, because it will lead Pakistan towards the strategic confusion, dependency and instability. That is the thought process of Shashi Tharoor. Now, let us try to understand how he is basically decluttering the entire issue. So, he says there are two players in this game. One is the United States of America and second is the China. Now, let us try to understand both are basically interdependent, and China as well as the US have some kind of the interest in the Pakistan. One is having economic interest, second is having strategic interest. So, China, which is basically looking for the basically economic interest via BRI, which we have opposed obviously, because it passes from the Indian territory, is Pakistan occupied Kashmir, right, which connects Xinjiang to the Arabian Sea. And Pakistan will gain is because of the creation of the billion of infrastructure, and obviously it will lead into the basically economy of the scale in the Pakistan. At the same time, due to the strategic location of the Pakistan, which is very unique, right, USA sees as a regional partner, regional security partner, because they want to control the Central Asia, or if they want to control the Afghanistan, Pakistan is needed, right. And what Pakistan gives basically gets due to the support of the USA, strategic F-16 they used against us, they are being provided by the USA. Political legitimacy, at times they are becoming quite legitimate in the world forum, and diplomatic access to the West also is provided by the dependence of the US on the basically Pakistan. However, Pakistan is playing from the both side, economically tied with the China, but military and strategically aligned with the USA, and it is basically a double game that Pakistan is playing. Now, what is the key argument given by the Shashi Tharoor? So, he says basically Pakistan's policy, he says the high stake trapeze act. We have seen this. This is a game in which people try to balance themselves using the rope. That is the same Pakistan is doing vis-a-vis China as well as the USA. But there are risks associated with. What are the risks? China and the USA are the strategic competitor, not friends. Both are competitor. We know, at least on the economic scale, they are competitor. Aligning with both the means Pakistan cannot fully commit to any country, right? And it creates mutual distrust. China will not trust the basically Pakistan, and USA will not trust the Pakistan. We have seen recently after the Operation Sindoor, Pakistan is sided with the USA, which is considered very basically antagonistic to the Chinese policy, right? And result we can see it, right? So, it is the argument given. Also, Pakistan have two masters as of now. One is basically economic master, and second is the strategic master. So, what Shashi Tharoor is saying, that from the game theory he is saying, you can't serve two opposing interests indefinitely, right? So, it can be a short term game, but not for the indefinite time. And Pakistan's policy is described as a client state strategy, extracting maximum benefit by playing both the pattern. They are saying basically we will basically extract benefit from the both, which is nearly impossible in the long term, right? But over the time, both pattern will lose the trust, and Pakistan will risk alienating both the superpower. That is the basically caution given by the Shashi Tharoor. Also, there is a basically growing threat of dependency trap. What is it? So, there is a heavy dependence on Chinese loans and infrastructure. We have even seen the CPC's example, which makes Pakistan a vassal state of the China in terms of the economic parlance. At the same time, they depend on heavily on the US aid and the military support, which makes Pakistan a strategic vassal state for the USA. Combine these dependency, weaken autonomous decision making, and it will jeopardize the foreign policy making of the Pakistan as well. Not only that, it also will lead to the moral hazard. What are the moral hazard? First, when a country gets external support regardless of the performance, it stops reforming internally. We have seen Pakistan is getting multiple bailouts. Result, they never care about their economy. The similar will be with the strategic sphere, because they are getting it. There will never indigenous development of any industry in the Pakistan. Pakistan's elite depend on the foreign money instead of the developing domestic productivity. They are basically becoming beggars day by day. There is a basically term used by the basically Shashi Tharoor ji. Tharoor subtly hint that the moral hazard is why Pakistan is economically fragile country, right? And there is a zero sum rivalry between the US and China, because it is like Cold War 2.0, right? US and China are in global strategic competition, and system hedging or trying to keep both the countries happy become dangerous, and Pakistan risk becoming battleground or proxy zone for the both the countries. One is a superpower, outgoing superpower, and second is the upcoming superpower, and they can become the basically battle zone of both the countries. That is very risk. Now, what is the economic angle? The China-Pakistan economic corridor often prescribed as Pakistan's golden ticket, and Tharoor argues the opposite. What he is arguing, he says it is a debt trap that we have seen in the Sri Lanka, we have seen in Myanmar, we have seen in the Bangladesh. While infrastructure grows, profit and control goes to the China. But it is very easy for the China to do so. And economic corridors thus become the strategic corridor for the Chinese influence. That is a basically statement given by the Shashi Tharoor ji. And what is the US factor? So, basically they are tactical ally, not strategic partner. Tactical means for the short term they can be ally, because USA's immediate need will be met, but not they are not the strategic partner. What he is saying, the US supports Pakistan when it suits American security interest. If there is an issue, if there is a 9/11, they will support the Pakistan, but once things are better, they will withdraw their support to the Pakistan. For example, during the counter-terrorism operation, Obama hunting and Osama hunting and otherwise, and Afghanistan's withdrawal, they will need the support, because they will provide them the basically sea route and otherwise. But it doesn't mean basically doesn't touch Pakistan for the long term, especially given Pakistan's support for the militant group. We have know that Pakistan is supporting the terrorist group. Harkate, HUZ is there, TTP is also there, right? Although against the Pakistan and all, they are basically snakes created by the Pakistan themselves, right? Hence, Washington's attitude is transactional. What is in it for me? If they are getting something about Pakistan, they will benefit, otherwise they will not, right? This means Pakistan cannot depend on America for a stable ally either. So, basically they are trapped between the between China and the USA. So, Shashur wanted to give the warning to the Pakistan that Pakistan's economic dependency on China and security dependence on USA is unsustainable in long term, because it is a contradictory in nature, right? And takes a transient artist swinging between the two ropes, one will eventually slip, right? And Pakistan's Jaman came is a ticket to the disaster. It is not a ticket to basically prosperity, but it is a ticket to disaster, right? And disaster refers not to the single event, but to the economic insolvency, loss of geopolitical trust, internal instability and insurgency, strategic irrelevance in the Asia's new world power. These are the warning given to whom? Pakistan by the Shashi Tharoor. Now, we will have to simplify if this analogy, right? So, basically let us suppose you are dependent upon two mentors. One mentor is saying you something else and one mentor is saying something you else. You will be trapped among two mentors. This should be not the case, right? For example, one mentor is saying to read only the barrack, second is saying only read the guidebook. So, you will be trapped among the two things. That is not an ideal situation, right? And if one tries to constantly benefit from two, then eventually find out that both will stop helping the country like Pakistan. That is the basically core theme. Now, based on the given basically content, let us try to solve the question which is shown in the screen. It says Pakistan's foreign policy exemplify the perils of strategic ambivalence in a bipolar world. Based on this statement, critically examine the statement in light of Pakistan's simultaneous engagement with the United States and the China. So, let us try to solve this question. Hope you will be able to solve it.